Hello and welcome. I'm Ijoma Onyato. Tonight, delay in issuance of landing permits to Air Peace by South African authorities temporarily stalls airlift of second batch of Nigerian evacuees. Federal government says Nigeria will not bring up the issue of xenophobic attacks in South Africa at the 74th United Nations General Assembly. Shell Petroleum Development Company to resume oil exploration on oil mining license 25 in River State after years of face-off with host communities. And Saudi authorities vow to bring perpetrators of attacks on oil facilities to justice as US reveals locations where they were allegedly launched.
On business news tonight, federal government sets up interagency task force to recover over 5 trillion naira outstanding debts owed to the Asset Management Corporation of Nigeria.
On sports news tonight, Nigeria's Super Eagles face 5-time world champions Brazil in an international friendly on October.
And from Abuja, former General Officer commanding 8th Army Division Major General Otiki objects to President of Court Martial in his trial over alleged diversion of the sum of 400 million naira by some soldiers under his command.
About 320 Nigerians living in South Africa may have to wait a little bit longer to be evacuated after a delay in issuing a landing permit to Air Peace Airline. The carrier says it just received a landing permit for its flight in the afternoon, and its managing director, Alan Onyema, says the flight will depart from Lagos around midnight. This set of returnees was initially expected home today as the government evacuates them in the face of xenophobic attacks on foreigners and foreign businesses. So far, 187 Nigerians have been successfully evacuated and profiled according to their states. The federal government has also confirmed that none of the returnees are criminals and that issues of compensation for victims will be handled by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Nigeria will not be bringing up the issue of xenophobic attacks in South Africa at the 74th United Nations General Assembly. And that's according to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Geoffrey Onyeama, who addressed the media on President Muhammadu Buhari's itinerary during the assembly in New York, which will hold between September the 17th through to the 30th, 2019. The UNGA will give President Buhari an opportunity to table the priorities of his government. Our correspondent, Kayla Megwa, reports.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honor.
Every September, the 193 member states of the United Nations meet at the General Assembly, one of the 6 main organs of the global body, to work together on an array of issues. This year, the 74th United Nations General Assembly will be presided over by Nigeria's permanent representative at the United Nations, Ambassador Tijani Mohammed Bande. President Muhammadu Buhari will be the 5th on the list of speakers at this year's event. The Minister of Foreign Affairs speaks on his itinerary.
Nigeria is keen to be elected into a category of the International Maritime Organization. We didn't make it the last time round, so we are persisting this time. We're also vying for a position on the World Heritage Committee of the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization.
It is hoped that the issue of alleged xenophobic attacks will be discussed at the General Assembly. However, Mr. Onyema says this will not happen.
With regards to South Africa per se, that's not a forum that we're taking the issue of the crisis that just happened in South Africa to the UN. You know, we haven't got to that stage yet, and I don't think it's necessary. I think it's something we can sort out ourselves. We have that capacity, believe, to do that.
The United Nations General Assembly provides Nigeria a rare opportunity to table its priorities before the world. One of those priorities is the safety of Nigerians outside of this country. But the Minister of Foreign Affairs does not believe that the relationship between Nigeria and South Africa has deteriorated to a point where it is being tabled before the United Nations. And he says both countries will be able to sort out their differences in a very short time. Other issues about work permits being cancelled, and of course a story out there about the returnees not being allowed back in South Africa, and of course other issues about compensation. He says these things will be discussed by the Nigerian and the South African government on the 3rd of October. Kayla Megwa, Channels Television News.
The House of Representatives is frowning on the refusal of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Jeffrey Onyama, to honor the lawmakers' invitation for a full briefing on the xenophobic attacks on Nigerians in South Africa. The Speaker of the House, Mr. Femi Gbajabiamila, has vowed to take up the matter with President Muhammadu Buhari. And for donating his airline for the evacuation of Nigerians from South Africa, the lawmakers also resolved to recommend the chairman of Air Peace for a national award. Our correspondent Terry Ikumi reports.
Lawmakers in the House of Representatives appear excited, perhaps to be back to their legislative duties after almost 8 weeks of recess. The House is resuming 1 week ahead of the Senate, which embarked on its recess a week later, due to the screening and confirmation of the ministerial nominees of President Muhammadu Buhari. After adopting the votes and proceedings, a lawmaker, Chike Okafor from the All Progressives Congress, is sworn in following a court judgment. Then the Speaker delivers his welcome remarks, highlighting the focus of the House as parliamentary work begins fully.
Today we recited the National Pledge, now part of our recitals at the beginning of every sitting. This will help inculcate the spirit of nation building, even in our subconscious.
Afterwards, the lawmakers react to a motion of urgent public importance on the xenophobic attacks on Nigerians in South Africa.
We as leaders should begin to take our country seriously, take our citizens seriously, no matter where they find themselves.
Julius Malema, the young man who was speaking out, whom you commended in your speech, is a young man who probably is in his 40s. A lot of young Nigerians in that age group today do not have opportunities to rise into leadership. What are the factors hampering this? What are the factors hindering this? These are issues which, going forward, I believe we can jointly address and find solutions to.
I believe we're here to serve.
The Speaker, in his contribution, has a word for the Minister of Foreign Affairs for failing to appear before the House Committee.
To refer him to the provisions of Section 68 and Section 88 and Section 89, and I will be discussing further with Mr. President on this issue. I think respect is reciprocal. If the House invites any member of the executive in our pursuit of happiness for all, then I think that should be respected.
The debate lasts about 2 hours, and the lawmakers resolve to invite the chairman of Air Peace for appreciation and recommend him for a national award. Then, a minute of silence is held for Nigerians killed abroad as a result of xenophobic attacks. Terry Ikumi, Channels Television News.
The chairman of First Bank PLC, Mrs. Ibukun Awoshika, is blaming the nation's security challenges on the rising cases of rural-urban migration with limited opportunities. Delivering a lecture at the induction of participants of Course 28 of the National Defense College in Abuja, Ms. Awoshika stresses the need for the federal government to ensure that inclusive and widespread development is ingrained in the country.
The arrival of the Minister of Defense signals the commencement of the inauguration ceremony of Course 28 of the National Defense College as he inspects a guard of honor. This is the first time the minister will be addressing members of the course in his capacity as the Minister of Defense. His address focused on the federal government's objective on sustainable growth and national development.
In line with one of the strategic objectives of the federal government of Nigeria to cause a sustainable economic stability, growth, and prosperity, which government seeks to expand on non-oil sector such as science and technology, agriculture, industrialization, and tourism.
In a lecture titled Economic Diversification and National Development, the chairman of First Bank PLC calls for an education plan for the country as a means of keeping the country safe.
We have an effective national education plan that ensures that every single child that is born in this country has access to education. Why is that important? An educated, enlightened mind is an asset in nation building. Structuring our economic development along the line of the opportunities and the resources that are available in different parts of our country in order to have a better spread of our population is strategic to keeping the country safe.
For the next 10 months, these participants will be enriching their knowledge of the security operations and national leadership as they will be engaged in various academic sessions to build their capacity.
The Shell Petroleum Development Company can now resume oil exploration in oil mining license 25, located in Akukutoro local government area of Rivers State. For the past 2 years, the oil installation has been occupied by members of the community who accuse the oil company of pollution and neglect. But the group managing director of the Nigeria National Petroleum Corporation, Mr. Mele Kyari, says the oil firm and its partners can resume operations at the flow station.
Ofoinama community, one of the 3 communities in Akokutoro local government area of Rivers State, hosting the oil platform for the oil mining license 25, operated by Shell Petroleum Development Company. Shell has been operating in the communities for the past 40 years, but the last 2 years has witnessed tension between the communities and the oil company. Residents of the community, mostly women and their children, occupy the platform in protest over alleged pollution and neglect by the oil company. At this meeting, the matter is put in perspective.
The communities didn't have peace for this period, and a number of disruptions that are going on, including the social life of the members of those communities. For us, that's the most important element of this dispute to resolve, so that these communities can have their lives back and we can restore peace and development to these communities.
It's not just losses from pipelines, but we also consider as loss to the country assets that can be produced that for some reason are just bogged down by all kinds of legacy issues and are not being produced. So we will ensure that all production that can be, every asset that can be produced will be produced during this time.
The mediation leads to the signing of agreement that will ensure the resumption of operation on the platform, as well as proper engagement of the host communities.
We hope with the spirit of the agreement we have reached, they will peacefully vacate the facility so that petroleum operations can resume. And to the benefit, because when there's operations in the communities, there are jobs, there are contracts. We have also an extensive community development efforts to launch. So we hope we can engage many of the people in the community, and including those who are presently occupying the facility.
In the next 10 days, the NNPC will lead the team that will engage the people and ensure that all exploration resumes in the communities.
In part 2, after the break, National Agency for the Control of AIDS advocates increase in medical research funding to effectively manage the HIV/AIDS pandemic and sustain the current drop in prevalence rates in Nigeria. That's in a moment. Please stay with us.